Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tychos, and I'm not even going to mention the fact that the Philadelphia Phillies are now leading the entire major league. Instead, this week it's time for a Tychos net worth pop quiz. In 2023, the federal government had a deficit of $2 trillion. Deficit is another word for net loss. It means the government's expenses exceeded its revenue by $2 trillion. That includes the high interest expense that is so regularly lamented in stories and articles by economists, politicians, and the media, stories that have that, quote, sky is falling quality to them. That deficit means that the government's liabilities, which we will also refer to as debt, ballooned to $32 trillion, and its net worth declined to a negative $23.5 trillion. In other words, the government's liabilities exceeded its assets by $23.5 trillion. So here's the quiz. If the net worth of the government declined by $2 trillion, what happened to household net worth in the same period? I'll give you a moment. Feel free to jot down your answer in the meantime. Okay, ready? In the single year of 2023, household net worth increased by $11.4 trillion and now stands at $147 trillion. That's from data directly from the Federal Reserve. So let me repeat that. In 2023, the government's deficit was $2 trillion and its net worth declined by that amount. And at the same time, household net worth went up by $11.4 trillion. And now the government's net worth is negative $23.5 trillion, while household net worth at $147 trillion dwarfs that amount. You'll notice that household net worth went up far more than government net worth went down. Sure, $2 trillion of government deficit spending went into household checking accounts because that's where most government spending ends up. It becomes household wealth. That same $2 trillion was the biggest part of the $2.9 trillion increase in non-equity financial assets of households. The rest of this increase came from the flood of new debt pushing up stock and real estate values, so that in 2023, household real estate values went up by $2.2 trillion, and the value of stock holdings increased by $6.5 trillion. More debt generally means higher stock and real estate values. Adding together these three items and a few smaller asset categories, we get that one-year increase of $11.4 trillion in household net worth. Here's another tidbit. If the government had not issued $32 trillion in debt, in other words, had not had that net excess of spending over revenue, households would be worth almost that entire $32 trillion less in net worth. So the government's net worth would be positive $8 trillion. It owns some buildings and financial assets. But now household net worth would be down to $117 trillion, or even less, unless there'd been some offsetting factor like strong export growth or debt growth in another sector to make up for it. Stated simply, government spending goes into the checking accounts of households and increases their net worth. Let's look over a longer period. Since the year 2000, government net worth has declined from negative $3 trillion to negative $23.5 trillion. That's shocking, of course, and wonderful fodder for the, quote, sky is falling stories in the media. But in that same period, the years since 2000, household net worth has increased from a level of $42 trillion to $147 trillion, for a total increase of a whopping $105 trillion. That's even with the decline in stock and real estate values that came with the global financial crisis and the COVID crisis, not to mention 6 other notable declines in the stock market. That kind of puts the government's $32 trillion in debt in perspective. There is a fly in the ointment, however, which brings us to the second and last question in our net worth pop quiz. What percent of the $105 trillion gain in household net worth since 2000 went to the top 10% of households? Again, we'll pause to let you jot your answer down. Ready? Answer's locked in? The answer is 69% of this, or $72 trillion. Let me repeat that. 10% of households got 69% of this $105 trillion gain. In other words, while the newspaper stories decry the deficits and predict our national demise, what the government's deficit and high interest payments really do is augment the wealth of our wealthiest households. That's it for this week. Thanks.